The stars had always called to humanity. For thousands of years, people looked up at the night sky and wondered what waited for them in the darkness between worlds. It took 200 years of slow and painful expansion, but humanity finally reached far enough to catch the attention of the galaxy's true masters. The conclave of aligned species had ruled the Orion Arm for over 10,000 years. 12 ancient alien races sat upon the highest seats of power, deciding the fate of younger species like gods, choosing which mortals deserved their blessing. When their sensors detected human ships crawling between stars, they watched with mild curiosity. When human colonies began to spread across dozens of worlds, that curiosity turned to concern. Ambassador Elena Vasquez remembered the day she received the invitation to Nexus Prime. She was 63 years old, a former military officer turned diplomat, chosen specifically because Earth's leaders believed her iron spine would not bend before alien pressure. She had spent her entire adult life preparing humanity for this moment. First contact. A seat at the galactic table. The journey to Nexus Prime took 4 months. Elena spent every hour studying the conclave species, learning their customs, their histories, their fears. She learned that the Velkari were the oldest and most powerful, their skeletal bodies wrapped in ceremonial metals that told the story of their countless victories. She learned that the Torvani were the traders, the Meshi were the scientists, and the Kreth were the warriors who enforced conclave law. She learned that no species had been granted full membership in over 2,000 years. The conclave chamber was the most beautiful thing Elena had ever seen. Crystalline spires rose toward a ceiling that seemed to open directly into space itself. Light bent and danced through the crystal, creating rainbows that shifted with every movement. 12 towering thrones formed a half circle at the far end, each one designed to accommodate the unique body of its occupant. Elena walked alone across the polished floor. Her footsteps echoed in the vast silence. She carried humanity's petition in her hands, a simple data tablet that contained everything her species had to offer: technology, resources, knowledge. Friendship. The High Arbiter of the Conclave was a Velkari named Kethvorin. He sat upon the central throne, his hollow eye sockets fixed upon the small human woman approaching his seat of power. His body was thin and angular, covered in plates of ceremonial metal that had been passed down through his family for 6,000 years. When he spoke, his voice resonated through the chamber like the tolling of a distant bell. "You are the voice of humanity," he said. It was not a question. "I am," Elena replied. She did not bow. Human advisors had debated this choice for months, but Elena had made the final decision herself. Humanity would show respect, but not submission. "Your species has expanded quickly," the High Arbiter continued. 43 worlds in 2 centuries. 17 billion of your kind now live beyond your birth planet. This is unprecedented for a species so young. Elena nodded. "We are eager to learn, to grow, to take our place among the great civilizations of the galaxy." The High Arbiter was silent for a long moment. Around him, the other 11 members of the conclave shifted in their thrones. Elena could feel their eyes upon her, measuring her, judging her. "We have studied your species," Kethvorin said finally. "We have observed your history, your wars, your capacity for violence. Your rapid expansion concerns us, Ambassador. Many on this council believe that humanity represents a threat to galactic stability." Elena's heart beat faster, but her face remained calm. "Every species has violence in its past, High Arbiter. We have also shown great capacity for cooperation, for creativity, for compassion. We ask only for the chance to prove ourselves." "You have already proven yourselves," another voice interrupted. It belonged to a Kreth counselor, a massive creature covered in thick scales and natural armor. "You have proven that you breathe like insects and spread like disease. How long? Before your 43 worlds become 400? 4,000? Elena turned to face the crest directly. We seek partnership, not conquest. We have followed every protocol. We have shared our technology freely. We have opened our borders to conclave observers. What more would you have us do? The chamber fell silent. The 12 most powerful beings in the known galaxy looked down at the small human woman, and in that moment, Elena saw the truth in their eyes. They had already made their decision. This hearing was nothing but theater. High Arbiter Kethvarn raised one thin hand, and a holographic display appeared in the air before him. The conclave has voted, he announced. Humanity's petition for full membership is denied. Your species is deemed too volatile, too expansionist, too dangerous to be trusted with the privileges of conclave membership. Elena felt the words strike her like physical blows, but she forced herself to remain standing. And what happens now? She asked. You will return to your territories, Kethvarn replied. Your expansion will be limited. Conclave observers will monitor your activities. In time, perhaps in a few centuries, you may petition again. It was harsh, but Elena could accept it. Humanity was patient. They could wait, prove themselves, try again. She nodded slowly and turned to leave. She was halfway across the chamber when the High Arbiter spoke again. There is one more matter. Elena stopped. She did not turn around. The Conclave has determined that humanity's existing colonies beyond the Sol system represent an unacceptable risk. The quarantine protocol has been authorized. All human settlements outside your home system will be cleansed for galactic safety. Now Elena turned. Her face had gone pale. Cleansed, she repeated. You mean destroyed. You mean murdered. 17 billion people. Removed, Kethvarn corrected. It is regrettable, but necessary. The Conclave must protect the greater galactic community. Elena stared at the High Arbiter. She stared at the 11 other counselors who sat in comfortable silence, who had just ordered the deaths of 17 billion human beings with no more emotion than someone ordering a meal. You will not do this, she said. Her voice was quiet but steady. It is already done, Kethvarn replied. Conclave warships are moving into position as we speak. The process will be complete within 1 standard month. I suggest you use the time to prepare your home system for its new limitations. 3 days later, Elena stood on the observation deck of the diplomatic station orbiting Nexus Prime. She watched as Conclave warships emerged from fold space above New Horizon, humanity's first colony world. She watched as blue fire rained down from orbit, turning cities into ash and oceans into steam. She watched 400 million people die in less than an hour. When it was over, she walked slowly to the communication console. Her hands did not shake as she recorded her message to Earth. Her voice did not break. This is Ambassador Elena Vasquez. The Conclave has betrayed us. They are destroying our colonies. Billions are already dead, and billions more will follow. They believe this will break us. They believe this will end us. She paused and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, more human worlds were burning. They are wrong. They have made their choice. Now we make ours. Vasquez out. She sent the message and turned off the console. Then she sat down in the darkness and waited for humanity's answer. The galaxy expected humanity to break. Every species that had ever faced the Conclave's wrath had either submitted or died. There was no third option. The 12 ancient races had ruled for 10,000 years because they understood one simple truth. Overwhelming force, applied without mercy, crushed all resistance. For 1 month, Conclave warships moved from world to world, burning everything humanity had built beyond the Sol system. 17 billion people died in fire and silence. Entire cultures were erased. Generations of work and hope and dreams turned to ash floating in the void. When it was over, the Conclave established the quarantine line. A sphere of patrol ships and sensor stations surrounded the Sol system, watching for any sign of human expansion. Any ship that crossed the line would be destroyed. Any attempt to colonize would be met with immediate annihilation. The High Arbiter, Kefvorn, announced that the human problem had been solved. The galaxy could return to peace. For 10 years, it seemed he was right. No human ship crossed the quarantine line. No transmissions escaped the blockade. Earth and its inner colonies went silent, dark, forgotten. The Conclave congratulated itself on its wisdom and returned to the comfortable routines of empire. Trade flowed. Politics continued. The death of 17 billion became a footnote in galactic history. They did not know what was happening in the darkness. Admiral Chen Weilin was 47 years old when the burning began. She commanded a small patrol fleet near the edge of human space, too far from any colony to help, too weak to fight. She watched the death of New Horizon from a distance of 3 light years. Her sensors showing her the flash of destruction and delayed images that took years to arrive. She spent those 3 years traveling home. And in that time, something cold and hard grew in her heart. By the time she reached Earth, the quarantine was in place. The human government was in chaos. Some leaders called for surrender, for accepting whatever terms the Conclave offered. Others called for immediate war, for a suicidal charge against the blockade that would at least allow humanity to die with dignity. Chen Weilin called for neither. She stood before the Emergency Council and spoke in a voice that carried no emotion at all. "The Conclave believes we are beaten," she said. "They believe we will collapse or beg or throw ourselves against their guns in futile rage. They expect us to act like every other species they have crushed." She paused and looked at each council member in turn. "They do not understand what they have created. They have taken everything from us. Our children, our homes, our future. They think this will make us weak. They are wrong. It has made us free. We have nothing left to lose, and that makes us more dangerous than they can possibly imagine." The Council gave her command of humanity's remaining military forces. They gave her resources, scientists, engineers. They gave her one order: make the Conclave pay. Chen Weilin smiled for the last time in 10 years. Then she went to work. The silent decade began. On the surface, nothing changed. Earth cities continued to function. People went to work, raised families, lived their lives. The Conclave observers who occasionally scanned the system saw exactly what they expected to see: a broken species slowly accepting its cage. They did not see what happened beneath the surface. Mars became a factory. Its entire crust was hollowed out and filled with shipyards, weapons laboratories, and training facilities. Millions of workers lived underground, never seeing the sun, building machines of war with hands that had learned to hate. The asteroid belt became a hiding place. Thousands of stations drifted in the darkness between rocks, invisible to Conclave sensors, developing technologies that the galaxy had never seen. Human scientists worked without rest, driven by grief and rage to push beyond every limit their species had ever known. Admiral Chen understood something that the Conclave did not. The ancient races had fought wars of ritual and honor for thousands of years. They announced their intentions. They followed rules. They gave their enemies chances to surrender with dignity. Humanity had done these things too, once. But humanity also remembered older ways. Ways from the dark times of their home planet, when survival meant destroying your enemy completely, when mercy was a luxury that could cost you everything. Total war. The Conclave had forgotten what those words meant. Humanity was about to remind them. Chen Weilin gathered the greatest military minds of Earth and set them to work on a single problem: How do you defeat an enemy that outnumbers you 1,000 to 1? How do you fight an empire that spans half the galaxy? The answer, they discovered, was simple. You do not fight them. You break them. The Conclave's power rested on 14 gateway stations. These massive installations controlled fold space travel, allowing ships to cross vast distances in moments. Without them, the Empire would shatter into 1,000 isolated pieces, unable to communicate, unable to coordinate, unable to respond. For 10 years, human engineers studied every piece of Conclave technology they could find. They built new sensors that could see through the enemy's defenses. They created stealth systems that made their ships invisible to detection. They designed weapons that could crack the strongest armor ever made. And they waited. Admiral Chun aged during those years. Her hair turned gray, then white. Her face became lined with the weight of the task she carried. She rarely slept. She never smiled. She became something more than human and something less. A weapon shaped by purpose alone thought around her. A generation grew up knowing only preparation for war. Children who had lost parents in the burning became soldiers who trained without complaint. Scientists who had lost colleagues became engineers who worked without rest. An entire species united behind a single goal. Revenge was not enough. Justice was not enough. The Conclave had tried to erase humanity from existence. The only acceptable response was to make them understand what that truly meant. On the 10th anniversary of New Horizons' destruction, Admiral Chun called her commanders together. They met in a chamber deep beneath the Martian surface, surrounded by screens showing the positions of every Conclave ship, every gateway station, every weakness in the enemy's defenses. Tomorrow, she said, we show them what we have become. Tomorrow we teach them fear. She looked at the faces around her, men and women who had sacrificed everything for this moment. Human beings who had transformed themselves into instruments of war. The Conclave believes they killed us 10 years ago, she continued. They are about to discover that they only killed who we used to be. What emerged from those ashes is something they have never faced. Something they cannot defeat. She turned to the main display, where 14 red dots marked the gateway stations that held the Conclave together. Tonight, those dots go dark. Tonight, their empire dies. And tomorrow, we begin the real work. No one cheered. No one celebrated. They simply nodded and went to their stations. In hangars across the solar system, dark ships began to power up their engines. Crews who had trained for a decade settled into their positions. The silent decade was over. The war was about to begin. Gateway Station 7 floated in the darkness between stars, a massive ring of metal and energy that bent the laws of physics to connect distant parts of the galaxy. Commander Threlvas of the Torvani species had overseen this station for 30 years. It was boring work, but safe and comfortable. Nothing ever happened at the gateway stations. He was reviewing trade reports when his sensor officer made a strange sound. It was a noise Threlvas had never heard before, a mix of confusion and terror that made his scales tighten against his body. "Commander," the officer whispered, "there are ships. Human ships. They are already inside our defense perimeter." Threlvas felt his blood turn cold. "That is impossible. Our sensors would have detected them light years away." They did not. "The humans are here. 20 ships. They are targeting our main reactor." For a moment, Threlvas could not move. Humans had been contained for 10 years. They were broken, defeated, forgotten. How could they be here? How could they have crossed half the galaxy without being seen? He never got the chance to find answers. The first missile struck 3 seconds later, and Gateway Station 7 became a cloud of expanding debris. Across the galaxy, the same scene repeated 13 more times. The human fleet had spent 6 months moving into position. Their ships were painted black and coated with materials that absorbed every form of detection. They traveled with engines barely powered, drifting through space like ghosts, invisible to the technology that the Conclave had relied upon for thousands of years. Each strike force knew exactly where to hit. Human spies had spent years gathering information, mapping every weakness in the Gateway Station's defenses. Engineers had designed weapons specifically to crack their armor. Pilots had trained on perfect simulations until they could fly the attack patterns in their sleep. When Admiral Chun gave the order, all 14 stations died within the same hour. High Arbiter Keth Voran received the reports in his private chambers on Nexus Prime. He read them once, then again, certain that there must be some mistake. The Gateway Stations were the heart of the Conclave's power. Without them, full space travel became impossible. Ships would take years to cross distances that once took moments. The empire he had ruled for centuries had just been cut into 1,000 pieces. His aide, a young Valkyrie named Sothran, stood trembling before him. "High Arbiter, there is a transmission. It appears to be from the human fleet." Keth Voran's hollow eyes fixed upon the screen as it flickered to life. He expected to see anger, hatred, triumph. What he saw instead was something far worse. Admiral Chun Wei-Lin looked into the camera with eyes that held nothing at all. No emotion, no passion, just cold, empty purpose. "High Arbiter," she said. Her voice was calm and quiet. 10 years ago, you burned our worlds. You murdered 17 billion of our people. You believed this would break us. You were wrong. She paused, and in that silence, Keth Voran felt something he had not experienced in 3,000 years. Fear. Your Gateway Stations are gone. Your empire is now divided into fragments that cannot reach each other. Your fleets cannot coordinate. Your governments cannot communicate. You are alone, each of you, isolated and helpless. Chun leaned closer to the camera. "We did not come to negotiate. We did not come to make demands. We came to teach you what you taught us. You showed us that mercy is weakness. You showed us that the only way to survive is to destroy your enemies completely. We learned that lesson well." The transmission cut to an image of Conclave warships burning in space, their crews dying in silence. "This is not a war," Chun continued. "Wars have rules. Wars have ends. This is extinction. This is what you created when you burned our children. You wanted us gone from the galaxy. Instead, you made us into something that will never stop, never rest, never forgive." The screen showed a final image, a human fleet moving toward a Conclave world, their weapons powered and ready. "You taught us what mercy earns. We learned." The transmission ended. Keth Voran sat in darkness for a long time, understanding for the first time what the Conclave had truly done 10 years ago. They had not eliminated a threat. They had created a nightmare. The Night of Broken Gates, as it would come to be known, was only the beginning. Within days, human strike forces appeared across Conclave space. They moved through the darkness like predators, hunting ships and stations that no longer had any way to call for help. Communication relays were destroyed. Supply lines were cut. Military bases were reduced to rubble. The Conclave species tried to fight back, but they faced an enemy unlike any they had ever known. Human tactics made no sense to them. There were no formal challenges, no declarations of intent, no opportunities for honorable surrender. Human ships appeared without warning, struck without mercy, and vanished before any response could be organized. The Kreth, the warrior species who had enforced Conclave law for millennia, sent their greatest fleet to hunt the human attackers. They followed sensor trails and intelligence reports, confident that their superior numbers would crush any resistance. They found nothing. The humans had anticipated their movements, laid traps in their path, and ambushed them from positions that should have been impossible to reach. The Kreth fleet was destroyed in pieces over 3 weeks, never once engaging the enemy in the direct battle they had trained for. The Meshi, the scientists of the Conclave, tried to develop new technologies to counter the human threat. Their research stations became targets. One by one, the greatest minds of the Meshi species died in attacks they never saw coming. The Torvani, the traitors, tried to negotiate. They sent messages offering peace, offering reparations, offering anything the humans wanted. Their messages went unanswered. Their diplomatic ships were destroyed without acknowledgement. On Nexus Prime, the remaining Conclave leaders gathered in the same chamber where they had condemned humanity to death. The crystalline spires still rose toward the stars, but now they seemed less beautiful. Now they seemed like monuments to a grave mistake. "We must surrender," one counselor urged. "We must offer terms before there is nothing left to save." "Surrender to what?" another demanded. "They do not answer our communications. They do not accept our envoys. They do not want peace. They want us dead." High Arbiter Kethvorin listened to them argue and said nothing. He understood what the others did not. The humans were not fighting a war. They were conducting an execution. Every strategy, every tactic, every attack served a single purpose: to make the Conclave feel exactly what humanity had felt 10 years ago. Helpless, alone. He looked at the empty seats around the chamber. The thrones of species that had already fallen or fled or surrendered to an enemy that might not accept their surrender. "We created this," he said quietly. "We looked upon a young species and saw only threat. We chose fear over wisdom, destruction over patience. And now we will pay the price for that choice." He closed his hollow eyes and waited for the end to come. The campaign lasted 11 months. Historians would later struggle to call it a war, because wars implied some kind of balance between the sides. This was something else. This was a reckoning. Admiral Chun Wei-Lin divided the human fleet into hunting packs. Each pack had a list of targets: worlds that had participated in the burning, species that had voted for the quarantine protocol, commanders who had given orders to destroy human colonies. There would be no random destruction. Every death would have purpose. Every attack would carry meaning. The message was simple: you burned our worlds, so we will visit that same fire upon yours. The first major test came at Torvani Prime, the homeworld of the merchant species. The Torvani had not fired the weapons that destroyed human colonies, but they had provided the ships that carried those weapons. Their vote on the council had been yes. Their hands were not clean. Human ships appeared in orbit on a quiet morning. The Torvani defense fleet moved to intercept, but they were outmatched in every way. Human weapons tore through their shields. Human pilots outmaneuvered their formations. Within 6 hours, not a single Torvani warship remained operational. Then Admiral Chun broadcast her offer. "People of Torvani Prime, you have 1 day to surrender unconditionally and submit to human tribunal. Your leaders will answer for their role in the murder of 17 billion people. Your military will be disbanded. Your government will be dissolved." She paused, letting the words sink in. "If you do not surrender, we will do to you what you did to us. The choice is yours." The Torvani government debated for 23 hours. Some argued for resistance, for dying with honor rather than submitting to the species they had helped condemn. Others pointed out that honor meant nothing to the dead, and that survival required swallowing pride. In the end, they surrendered. Human soldiers landed on Torvani Prime the next morning. The planetary leaders were arrested and taken to face trial. The people watched in silence as the species they had tried to destroy walked through their streets as conquerors. Not every world chose surrender. The Kreth were warriors. Their entire culture was built around combat, honor, and the glory of dying in battle. When human ships appeared above their colony world of Crethforn, the planetary commander broadcast his response without hesitation. Humans, we do not surrender. We do not submit. Come and face us if you dare. We will teach you what it means to fight a true warrior species. Admiral Chun's response was immediate and brutal. Human ships did not land troops. They did not engage in the ground combat the Creth craved. Instead, they systematically destroyed every military installation on the planet from orbit. Bases, training facilities, weapons factories, communication centers. One by one, they turned to fire and dust. When it was over, Admiral Chun broadcast again. You wanted battle. You got destruction. There is a difference. Your warriors can die with honor in the flames. The rest of your people will watch and remember what your pride cost them. The human ships moved on, leaving Crethform broken but alive. The Creth survivors would carry that shame for generations. The pattern repeated across conclave space. Worlds that surrendered were occupied and restructured. Worlds that resisted were devastated, but not destroyed completely. Admiral Chun seemed determined to leave survivors, witnesses who would remember what had happened and why. Some human commanders questioned this approach. Captain Marcus Webb, a young officer who had lost his entire family on New Horizon, confronted Admiral Chun directly. Why do we leave them alive? He demanded. They showed us no mercy. Why do we hold back? Chun looked at him with eyes that had seen too much death. Because dead enemies cannot learn. Dead enemies cannot remember. Dead enemies cannot pass their stories to their children and their children's children. She turned to look out at the stars. I want every species in this galaxy to know what happens when you try to destroy humanity. I want them to teach it in their schools. I want them to whisper it to their young. I want them to remember for 10,000 years. Webb stared at her. Is that mercy or cruelty? It is neither, Chun replied. It is education. The hardest test came at Valkyrie Prime, the homeworld of the High Arbiter's species. The Valkyrie were the oldest and most powerful race in the Conclave. They had ruled for longer than most species had existed. Their world was covered with monuments to their greatness. Cities that had stood for 20,000 years. Libraries that held the knowledge of 100 civilizations. Their orbital defense fleet was the largest humanity had yet faced. 300 warships, crewed by the best officers the Valkyrie could produce, defended their homeworld with desperate courage. The battle lasted 4 days. Human ships took losses for the first time in the campaign. Dozens of vessels destroyed by Valkyrie guns. But the outcome was never in doubt. Human technology was superior. Human tactics were unpredictable. Human crews fought with the cold efficiency of people who had already lost everything. When the last Valkyrie warship died, Admiral Chun made her offer of surrender. The planetary government, led by the High Arbiter's own family, refused. We will not kneel to lesser beings, the Valkyrie spokesman declared. We are the eldest race. We have ruled since before your species crawled from the mud of your birth world. Do what you will. We will never submit. Admiral Chun considered this for a long moment. Then she gave an order that would be debated by human philosophers for centuries. She did not destroy Valkyrie Prime. She did not kill its people. Instead, her ship spent 3 days systematically dismantling every piece of advanced technology on the planet. Power stations were reduced to rubble. Factories were melted to slag. Communication arrays were scattered across the landscape as useless debris. Universities were left standing, but stripped of every computer, every database, every piece of equipment that connected them to the wider galaxy. When it was over, the Valkyrie found themselves thrown back 300 years in technological development. They were alive, but they had lost everything that made them powerful. Their monuments still stood, now mocking reminders of glory that would take centuries to rebuild. Death would have been kinder, one of Chun's officers observed. Yes, she agreed. It would have. That is the point. One by one, the conclave species fell or bent the knee. The Mushi surrendered after their research stations were destroyed. The surviving Kreth colonies submitted rather than face further devastation. Smaller species, those who had voted against the quarantine protocol or remained neutral, were given terms of peace that left them mostly intact. By the end of 11 months, the conclave of aligned species no longer existed. In its place was a shattered collection of broken empires, occupied worlds, and terrified survivors. And at the center of it all stood humanity. The species the galaxy had tried to erase now held more power than any single race had held in recorded history. Admiral Chen Weilin looked at what she had built and felt nothing at all. The rage that had driven her for 11 years was gone, burned away by the fire she had spread across the stars. What remained was emptiness and a simple question. What do we do now? 50 years had passed since the burning of New Horizon. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. Where once 12 ancient species had ruled from their crystalline thrones, now a new power held dominion over the stars. The Terran hegemony stretched across half the Orion Arm, incorporating hundreds of worlds and dozens of species under human authority. The old conclave had been replaced by a new order, one built on different foundations. Not equality among species, but human supremacy earned through fire and blood. Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked slowly through the halls of the conclave chamber on Nexus Prime. She was 113 years old now, kept alive by life extension technology that human scientists had developed during the Silent Decade. Her body was frail, but her mind remained sharp, and her memories were as clear as the day she had first walked these halls as a petitioner. The chamber looked different now. Human engineers had modified it, adding their own touches to the alien architecture. The 12 thrones remained, but they were no longer the seats of power. They were reminders, monuments to the species that had once ruled here, and the mistake they had made. At the head of the chamber, where the High Arbiter's throne had once stood alone, a new seat had been constructed. It was simpler than the alien thrones, made of dark metal and plain stone. It was not beautiful. It was not meant to be. It was meant to be a symbol of what humanity had become. Elena lowered herself into that seat and looked out at the assembly gathered before her. Representatives from every species in the hegemony filled the chamber. Some were human governors who ruled former conclave worlds. Others were alien officials who served the new order, either by choice or necessity. A few were members of the old ruling species, the Valkyrie and Kreth and Turvani, who had survived the reckoning and now lived under human authority. High Arbiter Kethforan was there, though he no longer held that title. He was simply Kethforan now, a representative of a broken species, attending this assembly at the pleasure of his human masters. His ceremonial medals had been stripped away. His hollow eyes stared at nothing. Elena looked at him for a long moment, remembering the day he had condemned her species to death, remembering the fear and rage she had felt, remembering the years of war that had followed. Then she began to speak. 50 years ago, I stood in this chamber as a petitioner. I came representing a young species that wanted nothing more than to take its place among the stars. I offered partnership, friendship, the chance to grow together. Her voice was quiet but carried clearly through the silent hall. You refused. More than refused. You looked at humanity and saw a threat to be eliminated. You burned our worlds. You murdered our children. You believed that fear justified extinction. She paused, letting the weight of those words settle over the assembly. You were wrong. Not about the threat. We were dangerous. We are dangerous. But you were wrong about your ability to destroy us. You were wrong about what we would become when pushed to the edge of annihilation." Elena rose slowly from her seat, her old bones protesting the movement. "We did not want this power. We did not seek this position. We asked only to be accepted, to be given a chance. You answered with fire, and so we became the fire. You answered with death, and so we became death." She walked toward the edge of the raised platform, looking down at the gathered representatives. "I have lived long enough to see both sides of this story. I remember when we were weak and hopeful. I remember when we became strong and terrible. I remember the burning, and I remember the reckoning that followed." Her eyes found Kethvorin in the crowd. "I will not lie to you and say that we are merciful. We are not. The galaxy taught us that mercy is weakness, and we learned that lesson well. But we are not you. We will never be you." She turned to address the full assembly. "You ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years through fear and tradition. You crushed any species that threatened your position. You maintained order through threat of destruction. And when humanity arrived, you did what you had always done. You reached for the weapon of genocide." Elena's voice grew stronger. "We will rule differently. Not because we are kinder. We have proven we are not. But because we remember what it was to be beneath the boot. We remember helplessness and despair. We remember watching our children burn while ancient powers decided our fate in comfortable chambers." She pointed at the gathered representatives. "Every child in the hegemony will learn this history. Human children will learn what was done to us and what we did in return. Alien children will learn what their ancestors did and what it cost them. No one will forget. No one will be allowed to forget." Elena returned to her seat and sat down heavily. "We will be better rulers than you were. We will give opportunities that you never gave. We will listen to petitions that you would have ignored. We will build something that lasts not through fear alone, but through the understanding that every species, no matter how small, can rise to challenge those who wrong them." She looked at the assembly one final time. The old conclave believed that power was eternal. They were wrong. The Terran hegemony knows that power is earned every day, through wisdom and strength and the memory of what happens when rulers forget their responsibilities. The chamber was silent. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species waited for her final words. "You gave us this throne," Elena said. "You put us here through your choices and your cruelty. We will sit upon it for as long as we can hold it, and we will try to be worthy of the terrible price we paid to claim it." She raised one aged hand. "The assembly is concluded. Return to your worlds and remember this day. Remember what you have seen and heard. And remember, always, that humanity does not forget." The representatives filed out in silence. Some looked relieved. Others looked resentful. A few looked thoughtful, considering the words they had heard and what they might mean for the future. Kethvorin was the last to leave. He stopped at the door and looked back at the old human woman sitting alone in the chamber of power. "Do you believe it?" he asked. "Do you truly believe you will be different from us?" Elena met his hollow gaze. "I believe we will try. I believe we understand the cost of failure in ways you never did. Whether that is enough, only time will tell." Kethvorin nodded slowly. "Then perhaps there is hope for the galaxy after all. Not much, but perhaps enough." He left, and Elena sat alone in the darkness. Outside, the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the rise and fall of empires. Somewhere out there, on 1,000 worlds, a new generation was growing up in a galaxy that humanity now ruled. They would carry the memories of the burning and the reckoning. They would build on the foundation that Elena's generation had laid in blood and fire. Whether they would break the cycle of cruelty or continue, it was a question that Elena would not live to answer. But she had done what she could. She had survived the betrayal, endured the darkness, and emerged on the other side. The rest was up to those who came after. Elena closed her eyes and allowed herself, for the first time in 50 years, to rest.